Good evening.
Hi, good evening, Marcia, and good evening to your listeners.
Yes,
We're
good
under a
evening.
storm actually in Jamaica. We have a tropical storm passing through. So if you hear rain in the background, we're being watered heavily.
Oh, well, thanks for making the sacrifice. Please meet my co-host, Caswell Franklin, co-host and guest. He's everything in one.
Right.
And he's a trade unionist here in Barbados. And we want to welcome you to the Marcia Week show this evening.
Thank you very much for the
Yes.
opportunity.
Yes, I see that you've been very busy the last couple of days. That's what we're seeing. But truthfully, I know that a lot of the work happened way back. Way back then. But we
Right.
see we see a lot of work, a lot of TV stuff going on there, in media
Right.
happening there in Jamaica. Re this particular issue. So I have tons of questions for you, and they were flooding in, and we want to just say upfront that Philippa Davies does not work for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Jamaica, and she's not the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Caribbean, because people are sending me all kinds of questions from Trinidad and from different countries, Belize, all kinds of countries for her, which some of it those questions have to be answered by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs within the countries.
Right.
She's an attorney, and so she's going to speak to the Samoa treaty, and why Jamaica didn't sign, and possibly why others didn't sign. So, Miss Davis, can you outline for us, please, what about this treaty that would cause there to be such Jamaica to say we don't want to sign?
Right. So let me see if I can pull up a PowerPoint that we've used in our presentations. Are you seeing it?
Yes, lovely. Yes, I'm
Okay,
going to add
great.
it to the. I'm going to add it. Yes. Oh,
So
lovely.
I don't want to assume everybody has a background information. So it may be repetitive for some, but just to lay the background. So what we're talking about is a historical agreement that started in the 1970s, and it was really an initiative to try and bring some equity to former colonies of certain European countries, mainly Britain and France, and who were now in independence or pursuing independence, and to grant them preferential access into the European market for their primary products. But over the decades, the agreement and the relationship has changed. In fact, it has morphed to something that, when you look on this current agreement, is less about trade and it's more about political cooperation, or rather, handing the EU an easy access to a large number of nations who are also in the United Nations. And the question that many have had, from what I've read, is that, is the ACP EU agreement of any value now? Has it outlived its original purpose? There's little less about trade, and the preferential access has been whittled away through multilateralism over the years, World Trade Organization, different countries and regions having their own free trade agreements. So the value that may have existed in the 1970s, there's not much left now. So what then is the purpose of an ACP EU partnership agreement, and who really gets the benefit out of it? So it was in 20-year tranches, and it was renewed every 20 years or so. And the last agreement was called Cotonou, which really expanded in terms of the subject areas. And now we have the Samoa agreement that has been signed. So look at these subject areas that are under this partnership agreement. This is virtually all areas of national life. So public administration, dealing with tax and statistics, data protection, non-proliferation of weapons of mass destruction, drugs, health, law enforcement, education, youth, culture, investment and financial systems, food security, environmental protection. Now, there at no point do we deny the value of pursuing beneficial relationships with other nations. We are part of the community of nations. And this is what you do: you look for like minded partners. And if those who have a particular strength, you want to gain from that, or you can input into their economy or society, that's what we do. in the international space, but we ought to be pursuing relationship with those who are like-minded and share similar values. Yes, we are small island developing states and we need financial input and support, but we really have to weigh what do we give up in order to get aid. There is a moral component to everything. And we must ask the question, if we call ourselves sovereign, independent nations with a right to self development, what does that mean holistically, especially when we want to balance aid versus our identity, our values, our culture? These are very important questions to consider. So the problem that we found in looking at the then draft, it didn't have the name yet, ACPU agreement, was that there were tons of undefined terms that actually were controversial. Now, when you look on the agreement, it looks okay, it looks nice and it is also aspirational and yeah. But the problem is in the last many years, several years now, there have been agents who advocate an anthropology of human rights. And let's just be very clear, those that are advocating for so-called sexual rights. So the LGBT political activists and pro-abortion activists. And by activists and political, I mean that they want to change law and policy. So there are persons who say that they are lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, but they have no interest in changing the law and policies or how society is governed or the school curriculum. But there are among the community activists who want to shape society in their own image. They want to remove the legal and social and moral boundaries around sexual behavior so that it is all free and liberal. Do what you wish, however you wish, regardless of risks. And they want to call normal what is abnormal, what is demonstrably demonstrated by biology and the outcome of engaging in unhealthy sexual practices, that it is a public health risk. They want to remove those strictures. They want to remove objection. They want to remove the boundaries. That's what I mean by political activists wanting to change law and policy. And they will use various means, especially through the international forum. So there is in the agreement some terms that have now been hijacked and given controversial meanings in order to further their agenda of changing law and policy and culture. So the words are human rights, non-discrimination, sexual and reproductive health and rights, healthcare, social justice, hate speech. Those words are now taken and the ordinary meaning has been twisted to the point where persons, even in the European Union now, are facing what you call a weaponizing. They can't use those words in their ordinary sense and their truthful sense anymore because they've now been reinterpreted in a way that would give effect and allow for sexual freedoms regardless of risk. We also found in the
But Miss Davis, if I could
Sure.
just ask you there to just, can you go over those terms again? Because you said
Sure.
even healthcare, because people have said, I'm reading this and I'm not seeing anything in
Yes,
there. So can you go over the terms? You're talking about
right.
the terms
Human
that they've
rights,
hijacked. Human rights?
which appears throughout the agreement,
Yes.
gender, gender equality,
Okay.
non-discrimination, hate speech, sexual and reproductive health and rights.
Mm-hmm.
And there may well be others like resilience, social justice, violence. But I will give some examples a little more on
Later.
as to how they've abused those words. So it's undefined terms. There's no glossary to say what these words mean. And those that are in favor of the agreement will say, but it's what the words always mean. Well, we would want them to be what they always mean. But what has happened now is that they've been commandeered and given a twisted meaning, a controversial meaning. And unless you know, you will give assent to these terms being included in law, in policy, and not knowing that there is an ulterior agenda behind it. We found in the agreement open-ended commitment to problematic instruments. So, for example, the ICPD and the Beijing platform, these are uh, meetings, conferences, international instruments that were given effect or came into being in the 1990s, and they've had review conferences every 5 years, and many of them focused on women's rights and an empowerment of women and pursuing gender equality. But what has happened in the subsequent review conferences is that they've had these controversial interpretations of words in order to advance abortion and a wide understanding of gender. So it's no longer about male and female, but transgender, men who feel like they're women, women who feel like they're men, or if you're neither, non-binary, or if you're identifying as something else other than what your DNA and your genes say. And the language committed the ACP countries to whatever would be the outcomes of review conferences. And it doesn't say whether it is past conferences or whether it refers to conferences to come. The language was open enough, it wasn't time bound. There's also an open door for the return of comprehensive sexuality education. Now, comprehensive sexuality education, CSE, is a rights-based curricula that is focused on risk reduction rather than risk avoidance. It encourages promiscuity and high-risk behaviors. Its only boundaries are ensuring consent and the use of contraceptives. So it focuses teaching children to make sexual pleasure a priority, for them to enjoy themselves and their feelings and their body, and not to observe or consider the risks that would be involved. And depending on the kind of text, I mean, in the US, they have had some very graphic texts where you have drawing of body parts and people engaging in buggery and anal penetration and vaginal penetration, but children in children's books, and encouraging them to engage in all sorts of behaviors without limit. We have not had that kind of extreme um, graphic images, but we've had modules that we found in the school curriculum for grade 7 to 9, language that was suggesting that heterosexuality is abnormal. And one of the questions was, well, how wouldn't you know if you're gay if you haven't tried it? And why are you heterosexuals so flaunting with your heterosexuality? And why are so many mad people heterosexual? Those kind of seeds to throw questions into children's minds, to doubt that what they are naturally as being male or female, that there's something wrong with it. And so the Caribbean Protocol of the agreement says that countries should be recommending comprehensive sexuality education in their curriculum. Now, the design of the agreement, previously it would have been one body and all of the clauses would apply to ACP and EU. But in the Cotonou Agreement, which came in 2000, they split it up into regional sections. So you'd have a main body of agreement that would apply to ACP and EU. And then they have an African and an EU pact, a Caribbean and an EU pact, and a Pacific and an EU pact. Why would they want to split it up if the ACP is supposed to be one grouping? Well, I've heard people say the old adage of divide and conquer. And what we see in this new agreement now, it's a very heavy, institutional heavy design. So you have regional summits. So you'll have the EU and Africa, EU and Caribbean, EU and Pacific have a regional summit, and then they'll have a council of ministers, and then they'll have an ambassadors level, and then they'll have a joint parliamentary assembly. So it's splitting off the region, but the EU is in every region. You wouldn't have a Africa and a Caribbean or an Africa and a Pacific, but you have an Africa and an EU, a Caribbean EU, and a Pacific and EU. So it's very heavy in terms of institutional design, and then a multiplicity of consultation and discussion and strategy discussion in within each regions. And I've heard persons say and read, look here, the EU is facing competition from Russia and China. So this is about geopolitics. This is about power grab. The developing countries are members of the UN, and if you can amass support for your position on whatever the issue is, then with the EU with 28 and the ACP being 79 as over 100 countries, it is now about power and political influence. One of the other problems then was the threat to national sovereignty. We have this wide subject area that's under the agreement, and then we're now being parceled off into the region. And at so many levels, we're going to have negotiation or discussion with the EU. And within the agreement itself, it has this aspirational language about common positions and pursuing common paths in international organizations. The question is our national sovereignty being crushed? Is it being reduced? Are we now being tied to the EU? Having thrown off the United Kingdom and the Queen and the King, are we now taking on new masters in what is not a thinly disguised neo-imperialistic approach? Also of alarm is that the dispute settlement section of the agreement has, as part of the normal process, a very long consultative period. If one party thinks that another has infringed or is not applying their obligations as they ought, you would have a 60-day, 90-day, 120-day consultation period. But there is a clause that allows access direct to trade sanctions on two particular clauses: one, human rights, and two, proliferation of weapons of mass destruction. So imagine now, if the EU has a very expansive interpretation of human rights, which would include rights for transgender and rights for, LGBT. Not that we don't think that they have rights. They have the same rights that you and I have, but what they want is additional rights that would undercut the existing fundamental freedoms that all of us enjoy. If the EU has this very expansive interpretation to rights, but we hold to the original doctrine under the 1948 Universal Declaration of Human Rights, could that be a cause for a dispute? Could the EU launch a claim to say that we are not applying or we're failing to implement our obligations? Could this be a path to direct trade sanctions? These are the questions that we put to our Minister of Foreign Affairs 2.5 years ago, and we were constantly approaching them and asking them if they would, give us an answer. We know that we were standing on solid ground. We weren't being fanatic or pie in the sky, because we saw in the European Parliament's instructions to their negotiators in 2018 when the negotiations opened, direct instructions that abortion and LGBT things were important to them. They said that the human rights mandates in the agreement should explicitly include freedom from discrimination on grounds of sexual orientation and gender identity. Those are the code words that we know are for accepting, approving LGBT. Sexual orientation is undefined. It means whatever your desires and preferences are, whether it's heterosexual, bisexual, or homosexual, or beyond. There is no real limit. It's fluid and open. And gender identity is meaning whatever you feel your gender is. So it's not your biology, male or female, it's whatever you identify yourself to be. And so if you find this language in any human rights or non-discrimination clause that says you're not to be discriminated on the grounds of your sexual preferences, so interpret sexual orientation to be sexual preferences. You're not to be discriminated on the basis of your sexual preferences. You're not to be discriminated on who you feel you are. So take, for example, bathrooms. We have sex-specific bathrooms, male, female. But in the US and the UK now, you could have somebody who is male saying, but I feel like a woman, I can go and use the women's bathroom. Or a man can go play on a woman's sporting team. But you're not to be discriminated on the grounds of how you feel, which means that if you insist on maintaining those sex differences, you could face a court claim, a charge of discriminating on grounds of gender identity. Also, this phrase, sexual and reproductive health and rights, has to do with abortion. So this was important for the EU negotiators, and it was recorded even in briefing notes that this was a big sticking point in the negotiations. The ACP were reluctant to see the foundation agreement mention sexual and reproductive health and rights and sexual orientation and gender identity. So we know that this was a problem for during the negotiations. And what the briefing note also said was that the EU negotiators were disappointed. They did not get that clear language in the agreement. They'd have to satisfy themselves with compromise language. The thing is, it doesn't mean that it went away. No, it just meant that the language is still in the agreement, but it's now euphemisms. It's a coded language. You're going to have to go to those international instruments that have been mentioned, the International Conference on Population Development, that's ICPD, and Beijing Platform, and all the other instruments mentioned, and look in there and see where they have reinterpreted these words. So like I said, people look on the agreement and it look all right, it looks safe, but you have to know what the words mean and how they have been twisted and distorted. We also know that we're on solid ground because other European countries had problems with the agreement, particularly Poland and Hungary. And they have a very strong pro-life, pro-family culture. And so Hungary had said in April this year that they were going to veto signing the agreement on the EU side until their concerns were addressed. And what were their concerns? Their concerns was with migration, because they're very concerned about having open borders, and also that the language of the agreement would force gender ideology on the country. See there, they have the same problem, that the language would be demanding and requiring them to accept LGBT as a norm and to change their laws. We're not making this thing up. See, our European country have the same thing. But
so
guess what?
Poland felt
Yes.
the same way. Poland felt the same
Correct.
way. That's
Yes.
important to note.
Yes. But Reuters then said that Hungary said that they got assurances that their issues such as education, sexual rights, and labor market would not be affected. So I don't know what happened. We wrote our Ministry of Foreign Affairs and asked them what assurances were given to Hungary. Can we get the same? And they said, well, that's between Hungary and the EU. They were not privy to it. I said, but then we can get the same. If Hungary can ask for it, we can get the same, right? Education and sexual rights. It will remain under national authority, which means that if their laws say it is not to be allowed in, then their national laws would stand. But that's an important thing to note. Does it mean then that our national laws are under threat? If Hungary had to ask for this to be expressly stated, does it mean that this agreement would be seeking to override, or our signing of it and it becoming binding us meant that it would override our laws? This is a question that we asked our Minister of Foreign Affairs. Also very interesting, so we're not making it up. Namibia, 1 week before this meeting in Samoa took place, said they're not signing. Namibia said they're not signing. And they listed many of the same questions that we had about the meaning of language, the fact that there is no glossary or definition, the fact that we know the European Union applies these controversial meanings. And then they also said the EU unilaterally removed provisions for declarations in Article 6 after the negotiations were closed. Really? This is what Namibia is saying. And I would love to know, how can you finish a negotiation on a legal agreement and then one of the parties, the bigger, more powerful, wealthier party, go back and take out a provision on their own, and a provision that allows for reservations. Reservation meaning that you can get up and say, we agree with this and this and this, but because this conflicts with our national laws, we are not going to be agreeing with that. EU went and did. Who else? Has anybody else said anything? Have any of the other ACP countries said anything? This needs to be explored. This needs to be questioned. This needs to be brought to light. So Namibia said they're not signing. Well, we continue to lobby our Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And finally, we put out a press release on the Thursday before. And then Foreign Affairs Friday sent notification saying they're going to delay signing. The language was that it's not their intention to sign on this occasion. So if you're not going to sign it on this occasion, that means you're going to sign it on another occasion. Anyway, they also said that they want to continue consultations with civil society. So I hope that after 2.5 years of lobbying, that they will really draw us into consultation and have a discussion. But it wasn't over. Excitement happened in Samoa. We hear that 35 countries did not sign. What? 35 countries? That was so amazing. 20 African, 9 Caribbean, 6 in the Pacific. It actually was 4 when I looked on the list, 4 in the Pacific. I think that's wonderful. Now, they may have had different reasons. I don't know. They may have had similar reasons as ours. We also know that not all countries sent representatives to the meeting. But I think it would be very important for us to find those countries, especially in the Caribbean, and for us to gather together, because no, the EU is going to be on the rampage. They are going to be pressuring countries to sign before the end of the year. But we need to stand unless the language of the agreement changes, or unless they allow us to enter reservations to say that those controversial terms will not apply, which will then give public statement for you to know what the EU has said and how they interpret it and what our governments say, then they must not sign. And so we're going to keep up with the lobbying. We're going to keep up with the lobbying. I think that I'm going to end show there. So that is our position and a bit of the history on this agreement and where we are at. Now, I saw some of the questions that persons had sent, and I did some readings. I just want to share what a couple of trade experts within the EU did, because there's a lot of literature, which is really good, analyzing the EU's relationship with the ACP over the last 50 years and whether the agreement is really of benefit. And I can share those links with you, Marcia, for you to share with your listeners as well. So this gentleman, Mendeniel, was saying, really, the EU is wanting to have a framework that would allow it to have bilateral relations with a large group of people. So sometimes if you have established something that's historical, it might cost you more to dismantle it than to maintain it, even if its original purposes have outlived their usefulness. And so you want to have political access and to be able to exert influence over a large group of countries. But what he was saying is that it's an aging framework. There was little excitement on both sides for this negotiation. There's little clarity as to what the real benefits are. And maybe there's an outdated premise, because I remember when the EU was expanding beyond the original Western European, now you're taking on the Eastern European, they were like, well, they're not our colonies, so why should we be giving any part of our income to them? We don't have a historical relationship. It's just Britain and France. Let them take them. Why are we dedicating our money to countries that we don't have a historical relationship with? Then the EU has an increasing strategic interest in Africa, and they actually are concluding a separate trade agreement with the African Union, which would include other countries that are not in the ACP. And then the question is, what is the benefit, if there is any benefit to the ACP? There has been an erosion of the preferences over time and the privileges. And if it's less about trade and now more about cultural and political influence, is this to our benefit? But again, sometimes you get locked into things because it's been there always. We've always done that. It takes courage sometimes to say, well, maybe we need to leave and move on to something else. But also, there is a selfish self-interest, because the EU covers most of the costs of the ACP Secretariat. So people have jobs, right? And if there is still financial benefit, then you are going to have to ask that question. Is this really worth it? Are we getting real benefits out of this? But hear this now, because the EU has now ended the financial protocols, before you would have had financing as a appendix or a schedule in the ACP agreement, the EU has now changed their financial platform completely. They have put all of their financing into a separate arrangement. That is called, and I'm going to tell you what it's called. It's called, there we go, Neighborhood Development and International Cooperation Instrument. So NDK for short. They've put all of their financial arrangements into this instrument called NDK. And so all of the applications, all of the requests, whether it's from the Eastern European countries within the EU, whether it is external parties outside of EU, whether it would be us, whatever it is, it now gets subsumed under NDK. And this NDK is now about EU branding. You will have to satisfy EU policy. You will have to satisfy EU principles in order to be able to benefit from the funding through NDK. And guess what? The same controversial terms are in NDK. You are going to
Wow.
have to satisfy. So if you thought you could escape it under the ACP-EU agreement, well, no, it is right here in the NDK. So let me just slide down to where they have. All right, let me gonna bring this back up. Present.
Wow, this is interesting. And you know what is sad about this is that we had no opportunity, Mr. Franklin. There's no debate that happened in our country. We This is the most we're hearing about. We know of it, to be honest, with you, Philippa. This is the most that we're hearing of it. There was no debate, because we don't have an opposition here. So we don't hear anything. We didn't understand what was going on. But go ahead. I
All right,
won't I won't stop you.
no problem. So these are publicly accessible and available documents through the European Parliament portals.
Hmm.
So this is a regulation, the neighborhood, maybe that's a little bigger, Development International Cooperation Instruments, Global Europe. And this is for a period of 2021 to 27. Okay?
Hmm.
So let's go down now. I just wanted to highlight the general objectives are to uphold and promote the union's values, principles, and fundamental interests worldwide. So this is
Hmm.
stamping EU brand, okay? And then the focus is on eradication of poverty, promoting democracy, rule of law, respect of human rights.
But that's number one. That's the first thing they have there about their
Yes,
values and
it's
all of
about
that.
them. It's EU
Hmm.
brand, okay? Stamping EU brand. Promotion of multilateralism, stronger partnerships. And the specific objectives are dialogue, cooperation with third countries, blah, 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 blah. At the global level, human rights, including gender equality. So ask what
Hmm.
that means. What kind of human rights and what you mean by gender equality? And protection of human rights defenders. That also means the activists, the LGBT groups, civil society groups that are pro LGBT, to support civil society organizations. Okay? Union funding should be implemented through geographic, thematic, rapid response. They have the regional areas. And then let's get to how much they have apportioned. So Americas and Caribbean, it's about 3 billion euros. I mean, 4 billion, 3.3
Ooh. But
billion
but
euros.
somebody
Right?
listening to that going to say, man, it's 4 billion euros. What's gonna happen? We're gonna miss out on that.
Well, first, let's see what you have to qualify with. Then human rights will be 1.3 and civil society organizations 1.3. So let's know the general principles. It's a rights-based approach encompassing all human rights. That
Mm.
approach shall be guided by the principles of leaving no one behind, equality, and non discrimination on any grounds. Now, to
Wow.
understand, look here, discrimination is inherent in life. Discrimination is to make a distinction between options. When I get up in the morning and I choose to wear a dress instead of a pantsuit, I'm discriminating. I've made a decision on what I'm going to wear. You must discriminate. I choose to drink water from the tap instead of from the toilet. You must make choices, but based on rational, reasonable basis that would lead to what kind of outcome? It's a healthy outcome, a wise outcome. Discrimination is not a bad word. In and of itself, it is not a bad word. But what they have done is so attacked the ordinary meaning of the word, so that now when people think discrimination, they automatically have it as a bad word. We must not discriminate. When you go into the bank, you have a line for retired people or old people or senior citizens. That's discriminating to everybody who is under the age of senior citizen. But we accept that the older persons, they might need to sit, or they might need to be able to get through their business a lot faster. We have a different price for school children on the public transportation because they're school children as opposed to working adults. That's discrimination. So it is
Mm-hmm.
not bad in and of itself. The question is, how is it applied in the context? So, yes, if a man and a woman apply for a job and both have skills and are equal to the task, you should not be hiring the man or the woman because you don't want the man or the woman. Let merit be the basis for your hiring. But when you say you are not to discriminate on the basis of somebody's sexual preferences, I am going to make a decision. I don't want somebody who has a particular sexual leaning if the sensitivity of the job or whatever it is going to put me or my clients or whoever it is in danger. Or the bathroom example. I am going to discriminate. Women must have privacy, men must have privacy. We don't want people wandering into other bathrooms that would put them in danger. Let me tell you something in Canada now, who is so woke. They have even said men who feel like they're women, male convicts, men who have been charged and found guilty of sexual offenses and are male prisons, if they claim to be women, they can ask to be transferred to women's prisons because they're not to be discriminated on the grounds of gender identity. And there have been cases of men convicted of rape who then are transferred from the male prison into the women prison, and they attack women there, rape women in the prison. That
Mm-hmm.
has happened in Canada because of the folly of not exercising rational thought, but going along with non discrimination on any grounds, including gender identity. Let's go on. The instrument shall promote gender equality, women and girls' rights and empowerment, and non discrimination on any grounds. Again, the instrument shall be implemented in full accordance with the Union Commitment of All Human Rights, Beijing, ICPD, and here's the word, outcomes of the review conferences. What that mean? Committed to sexual and reproductive health and rights. Now, here they talk about the union commitment to the promotion, protection, and fulfillment of the right of every individual to have full control over and decide freely, responsibly on matters relating to their sexuality, sexual and reproductive health, free from discrimination, comprehensive sexuality education, healthcare. Look at it right there.
Wow,
This
comprehensive
becomes a
sexuality
filter.
education. Wow.
This is the filter for you to be able to get the money and to be able to implement it
So
right.
you need to accept all of that. And I want the people to hear, because we've been talking a lot about the comprehensive sexuality education. And so that people need to listen, that is part of the whole thing. As she says, the filter, you need to be able to be you need to be able to have all these things happening, in order to be able to draw down that money, right?
So why, if we need money in order to improve our tax services, or we need money to help build up the fishery industry, why is this a filter? Why is this a basis on which we want to get money in order to help the fishermen do better in their business? Why is it that sexuality, sexual behavior has now become the goalpost, has now become the platform, has now become the everything in order for us to conduct business and trade in our society?
Let me just pause there, Miss Davis. I've forgotten to share the new screen, and so
Okay.
someone just reminded they wanted to see
Oh,
it. So sorry about that, guys. So it's here for you to see. Okay, what she was reading. My apologies, Epic. So it's right here, so you can see for yourself.
okay. No, this is part of the let me say it, brilliance on the part of the EU negotiators, but the deviousness, crafty, clever, because on the face of it, it looked good. But unless you know the meaning of the words or have been tracking the changes over the decades, unless you go back to these source documents that are cited only by name in the agreement, unless you compare document with document with document, you will get up and say, but this is beneficial to the country and there's no danger here. But are they aware? Are our foreign service officers we appreciate them, they're doing a lot of work and there's a multiplicity of issues that they contend with. But are they able to understand and follow what has been happening? And to believe, because I think a lot of it has to do with belief. If they don't believe that people are evil, if they don't believe that they don't intend for us to really be independent, that they don't believe that there is a thing as neo-imperialism, if they don't believe, belief is where it begins. If you don't have that belief that this something could be wrong, then they will not see it or want to see it. But here it is, plain language. So this is the money. So even if you thought you got away with agreement, no, it's right here. It's right here. It's right here. So I'm going to stop sharing this slide here now. So the question I saw, one of the questions was, well, what do we do where we go for here? Well, first of all, thank God that 35 countries said no. I really am amazed. But like I said, the EU is going to be doubling down because it's embarrassing, you know. It's embarrassing to them because you had a plan and something has put a spoke in the wheel. So we really need to band together and stand together and to enable them to be able to say, explain what these words mean. And if they mean something that is going to be undercutting our sovereignty and undermining our fundamental freedoms, we don't want to be a part of it. But there's going to have to be unity now and strength, unity and strength in going forward.
What do you say to what do you say? You talk about the Caribbean coming together because there were 9 that didn't sign, and the in the Caribbean, you know, coming together. What would you want to say? There's a lot of Barbadians watching. What would you say to Barbados now? Because our name was not on the list of those that did not sign.
Right. Well, do you have a dualist system of the passage of international agreements or obligations into law? For us, signing is one thing, ratification is the next step. So if the
Caswell,
government
are you
signs
familiar
something,
with that, Caswell?
Ours is confused. I've seen the Caribbean Court of Justice saying that when you sign these agreements, that the agreements are binding on the country. Yet still we have other agreements like the Protection of Visitors Act that we signed back in 1967, and it's binding on the country. You know, so even the Caribbean Court of Justice, I would advise Jamaica to keep as far as possible from it.
yes, we don't want to go there.
Have no confidence in it whatsoever.
Yeah, agree. And the head judge, Justice Saunders, is on record saying that they are an executing agency for donor money, including from UN Women, which is one of the most rabid, radical feminist entities in the UN. And they are proudly announcing that they're an executing. First of all, a court should not be getting donations from the technocrats. They're supposed to be funded by our governments. But then to say that they are executing for an entity that has such a radical ideology that will influence their decisions. And we've seen that coming out of the courts.
But all they want firing simply because the Caribbean Court of Justice, when it was set up, that was working for the Attorney General at the time, and they set up a trust fund so that the court would not have to rely on anybody else for funding so that they can be influenced. I know the head judge is saying that. I didn't hear, but I'm relying on what you're saying.
Someone else told me that.
And some person like that should step down the same week. You know, because that is saying that their decisions can be biased.
Right.
You know, and I'm very sorry, but I have no confidence in the Caribbean Court of Justice. And there's something I want to ask you about when we finish this aspect, but I
Yeah,
will
right,
mention that
Right.
later.
right.
So
But
look,
someone is
right.
answering the
So
question for you.
ratification, right.
Yes.
So you can still do something because it could be signed, but it doesn't have to be ratified if your government does not ratify it.
Mm.
Ratification is then bringing it into your national law, into your domestic space. It can be blocked.
No, but
So
the
you're
thing is, the Caribbean Court of Justice is saying that if you sign them, they become part of your law, even though there's a requirement here for ratification. I said the Caribbean Court of Justice misinterprets our laws to suit the who wants it
Yeah,
who wants the decision. And as I say, I have no confidence in them because
right.
I've read their decisions. I'm not a lawyer, but I've read their decisions, and sometimes I'm embarrassed by the nonsense that they write.
yeah. So
Can you take a court case? I mean, a class action, citizens against the government if they were trying to ratify or implement this law?
Look,
mm, uh,
Barbados, the
mhm.
judges in Barbados, I think, are all now government lawyers, government judges. The prime minister is responsible for appointing judges. And we have a situation where if you sue the government, your case don't see the light of day. I got a case almost 20 years old that I cannot get before a judge. No judge will hear it because. And then again, I sued the government again last in 2021 over the COVID directives, and the judge refused to give um, her written decision. And then when she wrote the decision, it conflicted with what I remember what she read, and I asked for the transcript. Up to now, the Court of Appeal has asked on 2 occasions, ordered on 2 occasions, to produce the transcript. They ain't doing it. So I am very fearful of
Mm.
the courts
So
in Barbados and all the courts at Barbados is bound by.
right. So you're saying if we had if it's not, if we have to ratify, and Miss McLean is she's a former Minister of Foreign Affairs and she's saying they have to be ratified. If it is so, then there is there is a class, probably could do a class action suit. Is that what you're
Well,
saying?
I'm just saying, do you have within your laws the possibility to challenge government action and to block
Mm,
them, bring in something that would conflict with your constitution or bring about harm to public order? To the,
mm-hmm,
I mean, you'd have to look and see if there are any pieces of legislation that you could
mm-hmm.
utilize to say that this kind of agreement is going to bring about an inimical outcome for the society,
Right.
children, and whatever. It's being creative with the laws that you have.
Right, using what we have. Okay.
Right.
I'm hoping that we will cut this section of the program out and send it to a couple lawyers so that they can start, because this is where now you need the legal defense. You need people who who are going to fight in the courts. You need the lawyers like what you guys have there in Jamaica. Is there anything else you want to say to Barbados? About what we
Yes,
could do
stand, don't give up.
to stand.
Yes, it's your country, it's your home country. Don't let these technocrats come and rule you. The irony is that Britain, the former colonial power that facilitated this ACP-EU arrangement from the 70s, they left the EU in 2016. Brexit, one of the reasons for Brexit was that they were fed up with Brussels technocrats running their domestic life. And so they
Hmm.
left. But here we are, the former colonies, still in there, and now signing up to a new agreement to give them open access to run and influence our domestic space. The irony of it. Britain left, so we
Yes,
should leave as well.
we're still there, and we're a republic, actually. But I know I'm glad that that came out, because it's I know the issues that Caswell is raising about our situation in Barbados is so unique, because we don't have any opposition, and that's going on for a while. But if there is anything, any hope, anything that we could hold on to, and use, I think that would be great. Somebody's asking, there's a lawyer on the video, and they're asking her if there's any provision for class action suits against the government before ratification. So if
Can I
there
ask when are your next elections due?
as
4
well.
years, 2027, I think.
Oh,
Marcia, I would just like to thank Ms. Davies for her presentation tonight because it was enlightening. But I can sum it up in one word: we colonize. That is what they're attempting to do with us now, and Barbados has gone willingly into that because remember a couple of nights ago on the program I said that he who pays the piper calls the tune. We want their money, so we got to become prostitutes for it. And that is exactly what this presentation has said to is showing me that we need their money and we will bend over. Well, I'll be talking about buggery and stuff. I don't want to say bend over. Um, we want to contort ourselves, whatever position, to get their money, even if we have to accept things that are not palatable. And if all these other countries, even in the Caribbean, see the difficulties and see the threats in this piece of legislation, a piece about this treaty, and they have not signed on, how come the people in Barbados are so bright and we know more than everybody else? All these other countries in the world, and Barbados stands out there. But we like signing on and jumping on the things. Remember, we became the first people to establish an embassy in the metaverse, where the hell that was. We like jumping into stupidity because it sounds good to she who must be obeyed.
Yeah.
And I'm not talking about my wife this time. I'm talking about.
But you, I don't know. Are you connected? Are you connected to any? Because Jamaica is, you guys are leading the way. You're leading the way with this, and I want to publicly say thank you, because you were able to come on here, and this is the most that we are understanding of this thing. And I don't know if Caswell would agree. There are people who are logged on here, and people are. It's only a couple of days when the news came out about Jamaica that we started to people start to really look at it and trying to read this 400 or whatever page document. Luckily out of Jamaica they sent some pieces for us, and we were looking at it. But you guys were doing that 2 years ahead.
yeah, two
What,
and a
how did
half
you start?
years.
2.5 years. How did you start that?
We
What?
were
What?
alerted by what you call her now. She's not Caribbean, but she has spent her life helping developing countries understand what's happening in the international fora. It's her full-time work, recognizing that we don't have the funding to be able to set up dedicated agencies, pro-life, pro-family groups, to be monitoring what is happening. And her organization, Family Watch International, goes to these UN meetings, understands what is happening with the change, prepares materials to help our local activists, like we are, advocates we are. And it was she and others who alerted us to the fact that this agreement contained these euphemisms. And so we dug into the agreements, put together our critique, sent it to Foreign Affairs, and then started the lobbying process. They weren't too happy because at that time in 2021, they said, but the negotiations have closed. We can't do anything about it. Fortunately, COVID kind of puts everything slowed down. They would have signed it. If there was no COVID, they would have signed already by 2021.
Mm-hmm.
But COVID came and helped because things got pushed back. There was still some internal wrangling, like I said, Hungary and Poland. And then we had time now to lobby our government. And the point is, we're not too late. You who represent me in the international forum can't come and tell me as a citizen that I'm too late. If I am pointing out to you how this agreement is going to be inimical to my rights and my freedom in this country, you better take action. Don't tell me it is too late. You're not negotiating on behalf of yourself. I am paying your salary. You're representing me in that meeting. So don't tell me that I'm too late. I'm never too late. And so we kept at it, and they didn't respond to us. We kept writing. They gave us a little response. We say, you still haven't answered the questions. What do these words mean? But they can't tell us what the words mean because they don't know them themselves. That's what I think what has happened. But we kept at it, and we did stuff on YouTube, on every opportunity on radio, Christian radio. We talk about it. And we had their Christian rallies. We talk about it. We just talk about it, talk about it. Last September, the Prime Minister had a town hall with the Ministry of Education at the beginning of the school term. And because this was now the first time back full face-to-face after COVID, it was a significant event. And one of the youth group leaders got up, Daniel Thomas, his name is Dr. Daniel Thomas from Love March Movement. He got up and he asked the questions. I'm a parent, and I hear Jamaica is going to be signing this agreement, and it says to bring back comprehensive sexuality education. What are you going to do about it? No, you had the Prime Minister there, you had the Minister of Education there, you had the Minister of Information there, and the Minister of Foreign Affairs was watching online. So she now sent a message through the Minister of Information. Jamaica will not sign on to any such agreement. And the Prime Minister said, oh, yes, I've been seeing some videos about this. No, we wouldn't do that. We want to preserve our values and our customs and our sovereignty. And the Minister of Education said, no, come and talk to us. Come and talk to us. So we called the Minister of Education and wrote her, can we come and meet you? Oh, no, she don't say anything to us. We wrote back the Prime Minister. You say you're going to preserve sovereignty. How are you going to do it? Oh, no reply to us. And we wrote the Minister of Education. You said on national TV we're not going to sign the agreement. How are you going to concretize that? So we just kept the pressure with pressure. Then when we heard now a date was finally set, November 15th, we sent out that press release and it went viral. Boy, social media is an amazing thing, to get things out. Viral. And we told people, call Foreign Affairs, email Foreign Affairs, bombard them with this. Don't sign. And people responded. Even Jamaicans in the diaspora reach out. We don't want this happening at home. And they call Foreign Affairs, they email Foreign Affairs. In fact, one lady sent me a message to say she called at about 10:25 and she was talking with the receptionist. And the receptionist says, we're being bombarded with calls. Not the sign. And of course, we're praying. Of course, we have to pray. But this is a spiritual battle. This is not just in the temporal about national issues. This is a spiritual battle between darkness, between light, between good and evil, between what God says about the human identity, male and female, He created them.
Amen.
And we don't want lies coming in and to be taught to our children. So this was undergirded by prayer. This was undergirded by fasting. The church was praying. And then lo and behold, at 2:15, 2:30 in the afternoon, we get an email from Ministry of Foreign Affairs saying they're not going to sign on this occasion. I mean, that was just victory from the Lord. I didn't know this would happen, and it happened. No, she said on this occasion, so we know we have to fight the battle another day. But God did an amazing thing. And then look, you go to the meeting and 7 more Caribbean countries said no. God.
Wow. And you guys were at the time, it was just Jamaica out there. And now actually there are 9 Caribbean countries. There are 9. Sorry, Barbados didn't bring it to us and give themselves some more time and discuss anything with us. Somebody here, I know Mr. Franklin has a question, and just a moment, Mr. Franklin, but this person is saying if sanctions will be placed if member states do not sign, how will they deal with this?
No, if you haven't signed the agreement, there are no sanctions. The EU will pressure you. And remember what I said, that the funding is now a separate platform. The funding is not attached to the agreement. The agreement is hardly about trade now. The agreement is about the EU having this relationship with a large group of countries for them to further their plans in the earth. Okay? So it's now about political partnership and having access to this group of people. The money is separate. The money is now where the whole world who wants to apply for EU funding will have to go through.
NDK,
And then
that's the NDK.
okay, right. And you're going to have to satisfy the same principles.
Mm-hmm.
So the money is separate now. Don't think that, oh my gosh, we've lost the money if we don't sign the agreement. No, you're actually not losing anything right now because the money is separate. And as I said, there are these people who are researchers on trade and saying it's a hollow, it's a shell, it's not what it was in the 70s. So it's really about political partnership for the EU. The money now is a separate thing, but you're going to have to make a decision. Are we going to accept these principles, which they call EU principles? Are you going to accept those? And the question is, you might even apply for the money, and they will then assess whether your project, whatever it is, satisfies their strategies and their principles.
So it's not a
It
guarantee,
is not,
really.
and it never has been. Because
Never has been.
our organization applied for EU funding some years ago, and it is not evident that you are going to get the money because there's just so many hoops and so many documentations and things that you
Mm-hmm.
have to apply anyway, that sometimes the money just doesn't get used up because we don't qualify. We don't
Yeah,
have
I
the
know that for a fact. It's
right.
true. The documentation, a lot of times money from the EU money is so hard to get. And then, I mean, and for you know to be signing away the country and the children, with this pie in the sky, and you're
Right,
not sure,
right,
it's not even guaranteed.
right.
But I know Mr. Franklin has a question. Go ahead, Mr. Franklin.
Well, Ms. Davies, this doesn't have anything to do with the Samoa agreement. You're familiar with the Maurice Tomlinson case, because I was intrigued by the decision in the Court of Appeal in Jamaica because they said that in Barbados, our High Court struck down our burglary laws, and I don't understand why a judge would decide she's going to legislate for Barbados, because I think that should be subject of legislation. But the Court of Appeal in Jamaica says, you can't do that, and send Morris Tomlinson back to the drawing board. So tell us about that, because we in Barbados, I think the people just gave in and said, well, okay, well, you can go and do what you want to do. Because I think that was government desire, because the Attorney General, they say, oh, well, we're not going to appeal this decision. They're going to let it stand. And
Yeah.
I think that was reprehensible. He should be good. She should be trying to make sure that our laws are protected, and Parliament to remain
Right.
supreme rather than the court or rule, basically striking down laws that she's saying is unconstitutional. I don't believe it is.
No, it's not. And
So
this is part of the global agenda of the LGBT activists, right? So they use every portal. So whether it is through laws, through court cases, through international agreements, through the school curricula, through culture, through movies, through books, every portal. It is a global campaign to make abnormal normal, to silence truth, to punish truth. And it is also a spiritual battle. So we really just were grateful that our Attorney General was willing to fight the case and to be a good lawyer, because the arguments couldn't stand ground. The arguments could not stand ground, but we are just so grateful that our Attorney General was willing to fight and to maintain the law. So the thing is, our law was protected by, or is protected by, the Savings Law Clause. When we introduced our Charter of Rights in 2011, a grouping of 3 types of laws were insulated from constitutional challenge. And those were sexual offenses, laws related to the life of the unborn, and obscene publications. And our Savings Law Clause said that these laws were in place at the time of independence. Our parliament understood it. So independent parliament, not colonial parliament now. Our independent parliament considered it and said these laws are still good. We want to keep them. We want them to be protected from any constitutional challenge. So when Maurice Tomlinson brought his case, he was saying that the Buggery law is unconstitutional and it denies him right to privacy, family life, equality before the law. Through various backs and forth from Court of Appeal back to the trial judge, it eventually went to the Constitutional Court whether the matter should be considered as the whole question, whether the Savings Law Clause stands and whether the Buggery Law is constitutional. The Attorney General had the brilliant idea, wait a minute, if the Savings Law Clause says you're not supposed to challenge it, then the Savings Law Clause says you're not supposed to challenge it. So first, let's test whether the Savings Law Clause stands. Separate that from the question of whether the Buggery Law is constitutional. Deal with the barrier, the hurdle, the gate in front. And that was what the Attorney General said. The Savings Law Clause here, don't touch it. And he challenged that. And it went to the Constitutional Court. And they ruled that, yes, the Savings Law Clause stands. And the Savings Law Clause says we're not to challenge sexual offenses. This is a sexual offense. Don't touch it. And that effectively brought the case to an end. But 2 of the 3 judges took the opportunity to show their real personal opinion about the Buggery Law. And they quoted from some of the cases that have been cited in the other sodomy or Buggery Law trials that then led to the repeal of those laws. In Belize, in Trinidad and Tobago, in Fiji, in Mauritius, in the US, in South Africa, in India. And so by them quoting it and also giving their personal opinion that, this law is so antiquated and it shouldn't be around in our modern free era, it's so distasteful, la, 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 la. We realize that had they had the opportunity, meaning if there was no Savings Law Clause, they probably would have repealed the Buggery Law. They said, at least though, that it is not their role to repeal laws, but to interpret it. It's the role of Parliament. But the fact that they expressed this disdain with the law tells us that had they had an opportunity, if there was no Savings Law Clause, or if there was something that would allow them to say this law should be repealed, they would have. They would have.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Yeah, but Ms. Davis, we're almost coming to a close. But I want to ask you this quick. I know we're over time, but there's so many questions we have. What the Buggery Law being removed? Why is that so dangerous? I mean, because somebody might say, well, it's just the one law. I know, for example, in Barbados, when the Buggery Law was removed, there was another law that was affected, right? Mr. Franklin, the sexual offenses.
Serious indecency. They also struck that down as well.
There are 2, serious indecency was struck down, and it's still down. The Attorney General said they were going to put it back in place, right, Mr. Franklin?
Well, I see the thing is, I only want to hear him when he actually does something, because she said that's not that the Attorney General of Jamaica is a good lawyer. We don't have any such thing in Barbados as an Attorney General who's a good lawyer right now. And so we are just hopeful that the government will.
But did he say that it was something that he was going to put that back in place?
I don't recall him saying it, but because he was overjoyed that the Buggery laws were struck down. And when the judge went too far east and ended up in west, she struck down the serious indecency as well.
Okay.
And of course, people cried out about that. But he didn't want to challenge it. He said that they're not going to challenge it. I remember him saying that. It is only after people cried out that he might have made a statement, but they don't have any intentions.
All
right,
so
I gave you a slide. If you can share it.
Yes, I'm sharing it.
Okay, great. So this is what we use, the acronym of Buggery, to explain why we must keep the Buggery law. The Buggery law is really a line in the sand as to what is abnormal and normal behavior. If you remove that distinction as to what is normal sexual intercourse and normalize what goes against nature. In fact, some legislation says it's a crime, it's an unnatural offense. It's a crime against nature because it is using a body part that's made for elimination of waste as if it was a sexual organ or a part of the reproductive system, which it isn't. If you remove this statement in law as to what is normal and abnormal and equate it to normal, then all the benefits, all the recognition that goes for things that are normal must be attributed to this behavior and those who practice it. So our Bogri law didn't discriminate between men and women. It just said any person who practices this act. So it's not discriminating between male and female. So if you say that Bogri is equal to vaginal penetration, which is natural sexual intercourse, then people who practice it should get to benefit from the relationship recognition in law and society. You should be able to teach it in school. You shouldn't have it excluded from the school curriculum. You should give the benefit in those kind of relationships so it eventually leads to same-sex, recognizing same-sex marriage. If persons are struggling with same-sex attraction or desires and they want help, it is an abnormality. There are known root causes such as childhood sexual trauma or relationship trauma in childhood that then gets sexualized. And so you have the initial trauma that needs healing, but now you have this sexual addiction or this unnatural sexual practices, which is another issue that needs addressing and healing. If you tell them you're normal, it's okay, what you're doing is fine, then where do they go with this sense of uncertainty or that it's not right? Where do they go with that need for help if you have said that this is okay and it's not abnormal? And again, you need to tell young people or anybody really, this kind of behavior is wrong. Don't practice Bogri. Bogri is the most efficient way of the spread of HIV/AIDS, especially among men who have sex, who sodomize men. Why? Because that community practices role reversal. One can be the insertive one night or the receptive or the other night, right? I'm sorry, there's a graphic description. But you have higher rates of HIV/AIDS among the community that practices this role reversal of Bogri. So you need to be able to warn young people about the risk as well. And then what we've seen in countries that repeal the Bogri law or that then protect sexual orientation and gender identity, when you get up to speak the truth, you are punished, you're silenced because you're speaking against something that's normal and acceptable. How dare you? You are discriminating against me. So really the Bogri law is like a plug in the dam, but when it gets removed, then you're at risk. You're at risk.
Yeah.
So that
Well,
is
yeah, but actually, I mean, we see where now our children, in terms of in the indecent acts and so on, our children are not protected, and
Yes.
up till now that has not been fixed. Yeah. So
Yeah,
I mean,
and that's what happens also when they want to avoid getting pregnant, so they think that Bogri is a substitute, right?
yeah.
But there are
Um,
risks associated with that as well. Yeah.
Yeah, someone is saying there's an article that I think you sent me this today, Philippa.
Uh-huh.
In there, it talks about consequences for countries who have not signed. And so someone on here is saying that means that the countries would be censored, would be, what's the word I'm
Sanction?
looking for?
Sanction?
Sanctioned. Yes,
No,
they'll be
no,
sanctioned. So when
no.
they say that there are consequences, what do they mean?
Well, I don't know because you haven't signed an agreement, so you're not bound to anything. It is the international, it is the pressure that the EU will try to bring to bear on you,
Oh, but
really. But some
so it's not
these
being
More,
are
sanctioned.
more
no,
like
so you
black,
Not
haven't
more like
bound.
blackmail.
You're not part of any agreement. There's nothing that you're a part of right now. Nobody can sanction you for anything because you're a free agent.
It's
You
more
haven't
like
signed
blackmail.
anything. It's the pressure that they're going to bring. I'm trying to make you feel bad.
It's
And you're
more
going
like
to
black.
lose this and you're going to lose that. But we're not losing anything because the money is still separate. The money is still a separate process. And there's also those principles that you're going to have to sign up to. So guess what? Here's the thing. Those countries that have signed and said we have no problem with the language, should they come to an awareness of what the language mean, you're going to meet it up again with the money application. You're going to meet it up again. So you have to make a decision. Are we going to accept these interpretations? Are we going to abide by what the EU says its principles are? Understand what is happening in geopolitics. This is the EU controlling how you govern your country by imposing their interpretation, by imposing their principles on you. They want to have it locked, really.
Mhm.
I think the person that's not talking about sanctions, they mean blackmail. They will blackmail you into
Mm.
signing these things because they wouldn't assist you. But the problem here is that we got to stop trying to live beyond our means. And if we stop trying to live beyond our means, then we wouldn't have the issues where we got to go cap in hand, begging people for people to ask us to bend over and do what they want with us. And that is the problem here. We want to be first world. You know, this government, this prime minister is talking about we in by sometime down the road, just shortly, we want to be first world. And if first world means accepting a buggery and thing, I want to be third world. Trust me. I don't
A
buy
good
into.
question,
Go
yeah,
ahead, sorry.
a useful question that you could ask foreign trade is to set out the benefits to Barbados of the Lomé Cotonou agreements thus far. Let them say this is what Barbados's trade with EU has been since the 1970s, and let them say whether your percentages have increased or decreased. And ask them, I mean, that's information they should be able to produce. Let them
Mhm.
say this is how Barbados has benefited from trade with the EU or under the agreement over these last years. And then it will be a factual comparison. It ought to be a factual
Mhm.
comparison. If it's great, that's great. That's fine. But you would have had that information and data to make the assessment whether this thing is actually beneficial to you. And
Lome,
what is the trade and the reverse? What is the EU's trade ratio into Barbados? Who is really benefiting and in which direction is the benefit flowing?
Mm. Mm.
Lome was mostly for Barbados sugar,
Yes,
preferential thing for
sugar
our sugar.
and
No,
bananas for us. Yeah.
we don't got any sugar to send nobody now. We didn't got enough sugar to sell in Barbados. We import sugar from Guyana now. So that Lome
So
thing
right. So
served
ask
its
what
purpose.
right. So ask yourself, what is the benefit to Barbados from this trade agreement with the EU? What are you getting out of it? And are you getting any benefit because of the EU, ACP EU, or are you getting the benefit from just being part of the global trading world? There's
Mhm.
WTO, there are other arrangements and agreements. So what if your benefits have nothing to do with the ACP EU agreement? It really is no loss to you. If you have something that is a niche and people are coming here anyway, and it has nothing to the ACP EU, then this agreement is really just actually just, superfluous. That's the word, superfluous.
Mhm.
Bloated and unnecessary, taking up
Mhm.
time, right? So ask those are factual
Mm.
questions that
Yeah.
they can ask. Let foreign affairs defend. Let them defend with statistics why they think this is a good thing to do.
Mhm. 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 Boy, I really hope we're all listening to this, guys, because we got caught and we had, but now we have some time. We're getting the information here, and hopefully this is something that you will share with others and keep sharing it. Watch it over. I plan to sit down and watch Philippa again because I was taking notes, but you're going so fast. I'm going to sit down again because right, Caswell, you got to sit down with this here. Yeah, you're writing too. Yeah, I've been writing as well because Philippa, thank you so much. And we went over time tonight. Normally we end at 10 or a little past 10, but we went over, and because this is so important. We hope if we have more questions, if we can call on you again. But we really,
Sure, sure.
this. I think that this is a lot of good education tonight. That we wish we had this even 2 months before, but this is where we're at. And we thank you so much for being on tonight. You're busy, and you took the time to speak with us. I know Trinidad is on as well. Somebody's saying they need you again.
But remember,
You
it's not
know,
over, Marcia. It's not over. The battle is not
yes,
over. It's not yet in your law. And you're informed. You're going to go see what's possible in your law for the people to hold government accountable regarding international obligations. It's not
hmm,
over. It's not over. Right? There's hope and there's time. We're now gearing up for part two.
all right. You mind, listen, Caswell, you see where I get it from? You all see where I get this from? You see it, Caswell? You hear what she said? We not.
Yes.
I said yes. I said, I love it. Thank you so much,
You're
Philippa.
welcome. Yeah,
God
man.
bless you. Have
You
a
too,
very,
also.
very good. Enjoy the rest of your night. It's 9:10 in Jamaica, and
Yes.
I pray that the storm doesn't do any damage.
Everywhere is water everywhere, but thank God
Water
we're okay
everywhere,
at
but
home.
you're safe at home. God
Yes.
bless you.
All
Thank you
right.
so
Thanks so much.
much.
Thanks so much. All the best to you. God bless.